What's up guys, George G from the Wagon here. This week we're going to be finishing up Russell Ritchie's retro rebuild. We've got our first batch of parts in. So we already, in the last video, we blasted and painted our backing plates. These are our rears, these are our fronts, and we have received all the parts from Steve over in Southern California. So I tell you what I really like about Steve's shop. The name of it is S&S Air Cooled, and every part comes labeled with where it goes, like axle seal of kit, rear, left or right. So I think that's really cool that he has every piece labeled. So like when you're laying out your parts like I am here, you can make sure that I have all my rear section parts here, all my front parts here, all the way down to the drums. We received a new brake line kit because, as you saw in the other video, these are just rotten to the core in that thing, so we got to change all those out. These are the only parts I kept from his old brakes because I need my brake bars and my e-brake levers, and then the e-brake lever cable hold downs. So we're going to get these pieces cleaned up, blasted, and ready to go back onto these. So we're going to get right into another cool thing. Everything is Ate, Ate, Ate. If you guys know, Ate is our original supplier of VW brakes when they came from the factory. So everything here has been cleaned. You can see our brake adjusters all cleaned off and waiting to go in. We've got our anti-seize. So the first thing I'm going to do is anti-seize all of my adjusters. I also put some anti-seize inside there. All right, you want to make sure that these things flow nice and smooth, that they're not fighting. And if need be, I have a little ball hone that fits inside of these. We're going to get all 8 of our adjusters in, both front and rears. Then we're going to open up our hardware kits, and we're going to start installing our shoes, our wheel cylinders, springs, everything. Get these things buttoned up. We've got drums to paint because they're going to come out of those raw metal. So we're going to just give them an acetone wipe down, get them hit with the epoxy paint because they can handle a higher temperature rating. And then once these are dry, the fronts, we'll pack our bearings, put them inside there, and get our wheel seals going on them. So we have a ton of work to do. On this guy right here, I've got to get all these old metal brake lines out because if you guys remember, they're all seized up. We've already done our engine seals, engine to body, and our firewall seal installed the proper way, this facing up. So when that motor goes up against it, she goes up. We also have to do a 12-volt conversion because I don't have enough on my plate. And a little secret surprise, Spike, Andy Finch, is coming into town for one crazy weekend, and he's going to paint this thing really quick. It's like a running joke between the guys. They're talking about Earl Shai paint jobs. So this thing is going to get painted in Porsche Guards red, like the Ritchie King Ghia. There's like a little tribute to it. We've got our 5 spokes. Russell's got some Recaro seats that we're going to cut up Andy's seats to get the bases off of and put in there. But we just have 10 million things to do to this, and I've got 1 week's time to do it. So I got to shut the heck up and get to work. Necessary tools for the job we're about to do. We got a 13mm on a ratchet, and this is going to be for mounting our wheel cylinders to the backing plates through that hole there. This is a pair of pliers I have. You see how it has that gap in it? These are perfect for grabbing brake springs and pulling them when you need it. And this is actually a brake spring tool for the ones you have on the ends here that have the caps on them for holding the shoes in place. So right now we're going to start by installing all of our adjusters with some anti-seize in each one of these places here. That's what we'll end up looking like. I'm going to point something out on these adjusters. Do you see the difference in thickness of those two areas? I'm referring to that right there. So there's actually an angle on that shoe or on the adjuster, and it's for the shoe. When the shoe comes up to it, the shoe has a bit of an angle like this on it. If you put that in backwards to where the shoe is pivoting on that high part, you're never going to get a firm pedal out of it. So make sure you really pay attention to your adjusters. So either you have straight shoes, meaning the shoe ends straight and it'll be the same size on both sides of the adjuster, or you have the angled end of the shoe and you have to make sure that it corresponds with the way you have the adjuster installed in there. It's a very important thing to pay attention to. With the adjusters in place, now we can actually start building everything out. We're going to open up our hardware kit and lay it all out, and we'll discuss what each piece does. Our 2 horseshoe clips are for holding the e-brake lever onto the shoe. The pin goes through the front. Usually there's a spring washer there, which they didn't supply in there. And then on the back side, we have the horseshoe that holds the back side of that pin there. There's a groove in the head of that index is inside of. And that is what holds your e-brake lever on. And then when this gets pulled by your cable, it's what spreads the shoes apart once you have your brake bars in them. Next is going to be, these are the springs that connect to the pins. So you see how that pin has that flat head on it right there. That index is in there, and then you clock it 90 degrees. That's what that other groove right there is for. And that holds that spring under tension up against your shoe. So here the pin goes through it, that spring goes on top, and the cap goes on and holds it. That's going to hold your shoe captive to the backing plate there. The 2 springs, you have a long and a short, but this is what actually pulls the shoes together. This is going to pull from the top, and this is going to pull from the bottom there. So that's the way those are going to go. So this is everything for the rear. This is the distinguishing feature of the rear right here, is that they supply that for putting those pins in to put that lever in place. I've removed the levers from the old brake shoes. So what I do at this point is I pull some out of the package. I have my old shoe and the new shoe, and I got to make sure that we have the same pattern of holes throughout. And another thing you want to check is their height. Looking down upon them like that, make sure they're the same height. It's very easy to confuse brake shoes. Unfortunately, in our industry, a lot of times, you know, someone has switched apart, so you need to make sure that you're using shoe for shoe a match. So I'm going to go blast these parts. We're going to paint them with Alumablast. It dries pretty quickly, so we'll be able to work with these fairly quick. So I'm going to go get these cleaned up so we can start assembling the shoes and get them put onto our backing plates. Parts are blasted. If there's one thing I love, it's uncovering VW logos on parts. I just think that is so stinking cool. All these are original parts here, so we're going to go hang them up and hit them with some Alumablast. When in doubt, break a book out. So I have the original shop manuals. I'll put everything I own that you can find these diagrams on the Samba. I have a picture to work off of. This helps me identify where the springs are going to go. There's my rear brake hardware. Here's my front brake hardware. So you can see we got a really heavy spring and a lighter spring. So what I do is I'm referring to the photograph, and I see my lighter spring goes on the bottom where the adjusters are, and the heavy spring goes on the wheel cylinder, the top part of it. This is actually the back side of it. This is the way it mounts in the vehicle, that being up. Bigger spring, smaller spring, shoe springs. We got just enough hardware to do our other one. Something you need to take note of. So I put my finger and I run along this edge, and you make sure you have the same reveal all the way around there to center the shoe. If it needs it, you can tap it this way or tap it that way to make sure that it is centered along that. So a lot of guys at these pivot points will put anti-seize there. I prefer not to put anything in that backing plate that could potentially contaminate our shoes. I will actually put tape over the shoe to make sure we're not going to contaminate it with the grease of your hands, like you see just from working on the car, how greasy my hand looks and whatnot. Because when you get any sort of oil on it, you're going to get glazed over areas. So let's look at the old shoe here. So you see all those glazed over areas? Those are contaminants that got onto the shoe. And all that polish right there is areas where you're not going to have any braking whatsoever. It just slides right past that. These are our parts, freshly Alumablasted, but this is actually a paint called Alumablast. They've been hanging to dry for about 30 minutes, and they're workable. Not just painted, they're workable, which is pretty dang nice. We're going to build our shoes. We've got to put the pin on them. This is the hardware we have for the wheel cylinders. It's an M8 by 125 by 20 millimeter, and I'm using a lock washer on it, an actual split lock washer. And this is all 10.9 hardware. Any hardware you're using on a vehicle should be 10.9. So we have those pieces there. We've got the new shoes. I'm going to go take these pins over to my wire wheel and clean them up a little bit. And we're going to change out this spring washer for a new one. And then we're going to start putting the rear brakes together. Got the one front. I'm going to finish this before I jump onto the rears. I'm going to put that other one together off camera. That there is the angle that I was talking about. So you can see that that shoe is bedded up against there, and that's the taller side. And it's also bedded up against there on the shorter side. The shoe itself has an angle on it. You have to make sure you line those up. Shout out to Russell at Old Speed for showing that to me years ago. I had a car that had trouble getting brake pedal. We found out that was the cause. When the brakes were assembled on it, they didn't put them in the right spot. And what it does is it makes it a pivot point, like a fulcrum point, instead of being a bedded spot for it to gain strength off of. So this is very important when you're doing drum brakes. Going back, we are now referring to the rear brake wheel. All right, so there's our bracket. Something to take note of here. The curvature and the curvature of this. That's the direction that lever will be installed. One will be this way and one will be that way. One's going to be drivers, one will be passengers. So take note of that. Do not put them on the same direction. There is a left and there is a right. So I'm going to get these two pins put on here, and then we'll be able to install them to the backing plates and get these completed like those are completed. We've wire wheeled the pin. It's beautiful, ready to go on. We have a new wave washer on it. The purpose of this is to keep tension on this so this doesn't have much side-to-side play on it. So your end is out on this side, the big head of it. It's here. You put it inside there. We take our new horseshoe clip from our hardware kit, and we're basically going to pull that dude on there. Okay, now we have it onto the pin. Now we're going to compress that pin down. I'm telling you guys, if you don't have Nip-X yet, get a pair. Hands down the best pliers on the planet. Okay, I'm putting outward pressure and then squeezing that dude down to make sure that that can't back out in the future. Our lever is attached there. It's good to go. This is going to be for this side here. How do I know that? Because my opening for the cable to come in is on this side, and this is the direction you're going to want to pull that lever. So this is going to be driver's side, and our other one will be passenger side. So we're going to set the other shoe up with our lever on it, and then we'll talk about the brake bars. So Steve Widener, I believe that's how you say his name, is the gentleman that brought out all the parts. He and Russell Ritchie are personal friends. So he set Russell up with all the parts he needed for this. So I didn't have to buy anything. Everything was, he actually even delivered it to my shop, which is really cool. And the fact like everything's Ate, everything's L-Ring, just really good brands. That is fantastic. So Steve's shop is called S&S Air-Cooled Parts and Accessories. I cannot recommend him enough. Just for the way that these parts are labeled, it's such a time saver, helps out tremendously. We got wheel cylinders in place, so now we can actually start with putting the shoes on. This is going to be slightly different than the front brakes because we have to incorporate the brake bar in the mix. This is a very crucial part. This is how your e-brake works. If you don't have this, you won't have an e-brake. So be mindful of all the parts and pieces you're putting into this. You saw I have the book to refer to. If you don't have the book, once again, the Samba is an amazing source for all this literature and information that you're looking for. So I'm going to start putting these brakes together, and we're going to get this brake bar put in there. Now, here's something you're looking at right here. Notice that side has two slits, and this side only has one. That's your indicator right there as to how this goes. That's going to go into there, and then this is going to only take the one side that has the shoe on it. So that's a pretty clear indicator of how that goes. The bar is the same. You see that? They're the same left to right. The only difference is one's going to be this way, one's going to be that way to go left and right. So one's going to be dish, one's going to be cupped. All right, I'm going to get the pins in this. We're going to put the pin on this side to hold this shoe in place. So that way when we put the brake bar in here, we can bring the other shoe in here. So what you saw me struggling with a little bit in that time lapse is the spring. You want to make sure it's square. This right here, that upper spring is the stronger spring of the two. Because obviously this is just holding tension to keep it bedded in those adjusters. This has to make sure it retracts on the wheel cylinder. So it's always your stronger spring on the top. So take note of that. We've got our new wave washer in there. These parts are blasted and painted. Our backing plates are blasted and painted. We have anti-seize on our adjusters, threads, and the barrel. Don't forget the barrel. And we actually honed out the inside of that dude to make sure it's smooth as silk. So there's not going to be any issues with this thing. This is going to Scotland. That anti-seize will stop it from rusting inside there as well. Painting these pieces will stop it from rusting. This stuff is very important for the preservation. This is a very tough environment all these parts live in. That brake dust is brutal to all these parts and pieces. So a little bit of extra work in painting parts and whatnot is going to give it longevity. Steve also delivered for Russell's car a Rancho transmission. Look at it. All right, verifying. That is my fulcrum plate there, okay? And there's my other fulcrum plate right there. It's kind of difficult to see in there, but they're there. I know that they are in the proper location. We have articulation with the axle in all directions. So we're good. Now we're going to put this axle on. So it took 5 paper gaskets there. This is what it took to get this to where it has articulation, no resistance, but slight resistance. You want it to drag a little bit. Shouldn't be loosey-goosey because then you're going to have too much end play on the end of it. Just like the orientation of the brake shoes, I refer to a book. This is going to show me my order of application for my wheel seal kits. This is the style that we're showing here. Captive washer in the front. This is basically your 311. And it's going to tell me all of the order of everything I have in there. Your O-rings, where the paper gaskets are, the whole shebang. I've got that leg on the gearbox now. This is like an arrow. It points in the direction of movement on the car, okay? So that's how you know that this is the passenger axle. This opening is for your e-brake cable that's going to connect to the hook that's on the backside here that we installed on the shoes. So you know that this is the passenger side backing plate. Now we're going to do the driver's side. All right, we've legged out that gearbox. Brakes are installed on it. And you put the backing plate on. Now it's all contained. With the bearing cap on there, you don't have the same risk of dropping axles. You can see the mark I made there showing the direction of the paddle. I'm going to leave both axles facing that direction, so there's a lot less risk of dropping the fulcrum while we're doing the installation on this. We got the gearbox on the stand. Ocean's putting the cradle on it right now. We got the nose cone mounts in place, and while I was doing the legging out of the transmission, Ocean has been coming through and replacing these lines one by one. So we have all new hard lines. The only line we didn't change is the one in the body because thankfully enough it didn't come apart at the front. We've got our new master cylinder in place. We've got all the new lines run. I just went and picked up the grommet for the top of this from the Vet Off-Road buggy. So I'll have that to put in there. And we're going to change out this green line here, and I'll probably rinse out his reservoir there. Make sure we're good there. But all hard lines, fresh and new. Look how nice that is. All new rubber lines. Happy with the way things are going right now. The gearbox is actually ready to stab. So by end of day today, we'll have the gearbox in. We just got to get these sweet pickles in there. Alright, we got a little bracket that holds the e-brake cable in place, and the e-brake cable rides atop that spring there and connects to this arm here. When you pull your e-brake, it pulls that lever inward and pushes these shoes out with this brake bar in the center here. Next step on this side is going to be putting our drum on. Earlier today I had Ocean paint those, so we're going to go outside and take a look at those. So for doing these, they're brand new. They come with Causeline on them. So all I had Ocean do was scrub them down real quick lightly with some Dawn dishwashing soap, acetone, and we hit them with the VHT epoxy. It has a pretty high temperature range on it. It should hold up on these drums fairly well. Fronts, you can tell by the snout. We have that masked off not to get the bearing surface messed up. Same here, masked off so we don't get any paint in our spline area. And the inside is untouched. I mean, it's the way it was. We'll do a little wipe off on the inside with some brake cleaner before they actually get installed. When you're putting this clip onto your e-brake cable, it's very important that you pull that back. You see the washer is on the outside of it. So you basically got to pull that back, put the clip in there. This is what makes your e-brake return. So after you've pulled it, something's got to push it back, and that's exactly what this spring here does. So make sure that's correct there with the washer on the exterior of the keeper clip. Got a little bit further on this. This morning I put the brake lines that connect to the axles. We put the shocks in. I have that Ocean come in and grind all the paint off of that with a Scotch-Brite roll-off disc. We want a good connection between motor and trans for the ground. And then I had him do the backside of the starter. Not sure if he's got that part done yet. Up there, so we grind that so when the starter makes contact with the transmission housing, the ground continues. So that's something we do every time. I learned this trick from John Holton from RC Trans. Yeah, I got Ocean cleaning the connection that goes onto the lug of the starter because it's super corroded. Goes right along with everything else in this car. Pretty super corroded. And it's funny when you see this juxtaposition of all this rot and stuff, and then you have all this brand new gear all the way around it. So I'm going to go crack into that front end. So hopefully our front end will look just as nice as that rear when we get done. Once we got a new beam chilling here, everything in here all freshly redone. So let's get to it. We also have a fuel pump to install here to power those 48s. So we're gonna do the Carter fuel pump. I got one in stock. Most of this Ocean's gonna take care of this next. I gotta get rid of all the junk we got here. These are the 48s for Russell's motor. And we still have a couple of front end pieces here that we need to do, bearings and seals for the front axles. And the front shocks, which I have not installed yet, is one of them. And here's the other one. All the rest of these, though, are empty boxes, just to show you how far we've made it, except for that starter. Brand new starter going in. And something to take note, when Steve delivered this to me, we have a new bushing inside there. When you're putting a transmission, guys, if you don't have a self-supported starter, make sure you're checking that bushing. That is a big deal. That is a really big deal. That'll make a starter not work in a car real quick. All right, let's get to it. We are moving on to the front beam. I've already built the brakes. Ocean has painted my front drums. We've got our trailing arm seals. We've got all new tie rod ends, a new steering dampener, a new steering coupler. I need to narrow these tie rods. We're going to put the new tie rod ends on them. When Steve ordered this beam, they were out of narrow torsions. So I get to narrow his stock torsions, which is a crap job if you've ever done it. You know, you have to drill these dimples back into it. I've done it a million times because I've built beams from scratch before, but it just sucks. Just one more step I got to do, and there's so much stuff to do in this car. So we're going to get right to it. One of the tricks I do for narrowing torsions, this will show you how long it's been. Look how dusty that dude is. On a stock trailing arm, these are dimpled over. Those are like chisel marks. So what I've done is I've made them fully square. So these will slide over the stock torsion with no resistance. The torsions will stick out at the end, and we lop it off there. So you're going to see that in this time lapse we're going to set up here. So I'll put the torsions in the beam. I'm going to put the trailing arms off. We're going to get a cutting wheel and chop those dudes off. And then we're going to mark our dimple through that hole. And then we are going to get everything set up and assembled on this front beam. I have all our spindles and everything painted over there by the car, on the cart. I didn't want to bring them here since we're going to be cutting stuff up, and I didn't want any dust get on them. And then we're just going to do a mat assembly on all the stuff. I'd like to have the front beam built and in the car by the end of the day, because we still got a motor to stab in it. This is the, I believe it's a 2276, delivered over here by Steve. Not sure who built it, but we got this. We got 48 IDAs going on it. I have to do an oiling system in that Ghia. Just a couple things I have to get done before Wednesday of next week when Andy Finch comes in town. Spike comes in town, and he is going to paint that thing Porsche cards red. That's a good times here, people. Let's get to it. So I'm removing this center, like this is your set screw that goes into the dimple of your torsion. So I remove it, I remove this bolt, I feed the torsions through, and I wait until I see the dimple, and then I know I stop it, and then I'm putting that in to lock it in place. So we should have exactly even reveals here, because these are out of a stock car. Another thing I did, I labeled them. So when I took this out, this is lower driver side, so I know what side that was, where it went. So I got upper torsions and lower torsions, that being my lower driver, so I know that it's this side. Now you should have an understanding what I was talking about. So the torsion cannot come through a factory arm like this. I've modified these. As you see, they even got cut marks in them. These are never to be used on a vehicle again, but what they allow me to do, whatever size beam I do, this being a 2-inch, like even if I'm doing a 4-inch narrowed beam, the 4 inches will come through and I can lop it off at that point. So we've got all 4 of these arms in with their torsion seals. Don't forget that, guys, if you're doing this. So we're going to use an angle grinder to cut these springs off. I cannot stress this enough when you're using this tool. This is probably one of the most dangerous tools that people misuse. When this disc breaks, it's projectiles everywhere. Eye protection, I have on already, and a face shield. Gloves, at the minimum. Technically, I should be rocking my apron right now, but I'm not. But when you're working with this, all it takes is one bad angle, this thing explodes. And look them up online. You'll see pictures of people with a disc in their face, and it is wretched. I can only imagine how much that freaking hurts. So put your personal protection on. This is the easy part of this, cutting the torsion springs. You know, there's another thing you need to make note of if you copy this method and you have a spare set of arms like I do. These need to be shorter still because the stock arms are going to be dimpled. So you're going to want to mark your hole first, put your dimple into it, and then you have to do a serious chamfering job on all these springs here. So if you weld the end of it, you change the hardness, and good luck drilling that. Holy smokes, it turns this into a freaking hardened piece of steel once you actually put a little weld on there. All this is going to have to be chamfered and fit, and maybe even brought back a little bit. So for that, I use a very aggressive grinding disc. I have another one set up with a grinding, like a flap wheel, with like a 60 grit, and I just go nuts on the end of it, really bring it in a little bit, and also put my angles all the way around it. So that's actually the cut part of narrowing the torsion. Now we got the difficult part of actually dimpling the torsion. I'm going to show you how I do that. All right, at this point we are going to mark where the dimple is going. So I'm going to make sure that I got a little bit of compression on my torsion seal. And I'm using a grease pencil at this point to do this with. What I should do is actually just set up a bit that I can go directly into that with. Would probably be the better way to do that. So my process for doing these holes is this. I start with a smaller drill bit, usually like a 7/64, something like that. And I'm just going to go into the first two torsions and actually put a hole in it. Then I step up the bit and step up the bit and step up the bit. And then I have an actual angle bit that's going to cut a 45 degree once I get a deep enough hole. The bit can't cut through, so it won't dig, but if I put the hole already, it will clear out a way to the bottom of that hole. So I've come in with a smaller bit. And what this does is this drills a hole into the torsions. Notice it's still captive inside of here. And it drills the hole. And then I use this bit, which cuts my grub on the end of it. So once the hole's drilled, this can do all the cutting it needs to do because it's not trying to drill through the metal. So you're only going into the torsions, like you can even see from the pieces that I've cut out here. That's probably one of the deeper ones. You don't go crazy until you're not cutting halfway through the freaking torsions. You just need to give it a space for that grub right there to seat into and hold it in place. And we're going to hold those two next to each other. You can see the angle's really close. Not exact, but it's close enough to where this is going to get a good bite and a good bed into those and hold the beam together, not allowing the trailing arm to move out. The factory pins will allow the springs to stay captive once we've ground these down a little bit and make them fit. All right, our dimples are done. Let me see if the light will go in there. Everything's been dimpled. So now we're going to pull the trailing arms off, remove the torsions from the beam, and I'm going to do my final bit of work to the ends to take a little bit of length off of them and do a good chamfer around all the edges. So you're going to put angles on everything. There's a couple reasons for that. It makes it easy to install when you're putting it through that center, and it allows it to go inside those factory pins that we've ground off of these arms. I pulled this out of the beam. These are my lower torsion springs. You see they're on the beam there. This is the first side I pulled out, and I put a grease pencil mark on across the nose. This is going to go back in the same direction that I had it installed when I dimpled it. So now what we're going to do is, since we have it on these two and they're held together in their shape, I'm going to get out my flap wheel grinder, and we're going to take a little bit of length off that and put our angles on all those ends. But there's our dimple. There's a factory dimple. And there's my other dimple there. We got a Bosch angle grinder with, I believe this is a 60 flap wheel. That is going to take the majority of the bulk off of these. And I mean, we're going to take just a minimal amount off. Like if I'm going to mark with the grease pencil, you know, we're only going to go to about there. Nothing too crazy. Get those things ground down a little bit, get my chamfer on them, put it back in, do the same thing to the top one. So now we're narrowed a little bit more, and we've also chamfered the edges on that side, chamfered the edges there. I still have my grease pencil line there, so I know that this is the end that's going to stick out of that side of the beam. So I'm going to put this back in the beam. I'm going to get his actual trailing arms, put them on. In order to put it back in the beam, I got a pair of rubber gloves here. I've got a tub of grease, because we are going to load everything up with plenty of grease. We're going to pack the springs with grease. We're going to make sure that when we put the trailing arms in, that they're loaded with grease to make sure these bearings get done. We got the Zerk fittings to put in there, and then we're going to pump some grease into it even after all that's done. But obviously I got to do the top set of springs first. But I'm going to try this out, see how everything fits, make sure we're good to go. This is with Russell's arm on it now. So this is the actual arm that's going to stick with this beam. Because we knew this was coming, you see how that's dimpled in there? You can't see it, but that lines up with my dimple inside there. We already put that in to set the torsions in when we put it. And I have, unfortunately my camera died when I was doing this, but I packed that inner bearing with all kinds of grease, and these torsions are slathered in grease before they were actually ever put into the beam. So you want to make sure that you really get these things covered in grease. That's preservation for them, especially with this thing going to Scotland. The only defense they have against rot and breaking is that grease you're putting on it. All right, we're going to put that grub screw in and tighten it down, and it should actually suck in a little bit on that hole there. Very difficult to see, sorry about that, guys. But just knowing what you're dealing with, and this is just from experience, but the experience that you're getting is the fact that I've done this and I'm showing you that. So you won't have to deal with some of the stuff. Torsions are narrowed. Original trailing arms are back on it. Trailing arm seals are in. So now we're going to get this into the car, and we are going to hang spindles. So I'll show you the shimming technique of those. I do a pretty archaic version of it. I don't have the actual tool that goes in there, but I think I get it pretty darn close. I got to get some more of these. I can't find his original hardware. I don't know where it went to. And I know I have some of these separated, just the jam nuts that go on those dudes. We don't have anything snugged up in this center section because we don't have right height set. And I've got to dig out his Zerk fittings and put those into the beam and pump some grease into this dude. Since we're lowering this car, we're adding some caster shims to the back. So what I do is I loosen up the front hardware and I just make a little bit of a gap. I put my pry bar there and just tapping that guy in there just like that. This helps with stability at higher speeds, especially in lowered cars. So I've measured the offset from the top to bottom trailing arm. That's what I was doing in that video I just had before. And this one's coming out to, on the chart, it's going to be an 8 8.5. So I write that on the beam. It's just a grease pencil. And then I've measured this side already, and this side is a 7. Then we go over to the chart here. We find our corresponding numbers on the chart, like there's my 8.5, and there's the 7. So my passenger spindle, the shim stack will be led to that one. On my driver side spindle, the shim stack is to be set up as such there. I'm utilizing this chart. This is just a photocopy of my book because I don't like to mess my book up. You can actually print this off of the Samba because I know they have this actual same chart available. Our passenger side measured at the 7, our driver side measured at the 8.5. And this tells you that spot there, this is going to be directly touching the trailing arm on the link pin. So A on my driver's side will have 5. B, which is the outside where the head of the link pin is going to be, that shim stack will be 3. And so on and so forth. This tells you exactly where, and it's clearly labeled where each number corresponding to what line it's at is here, or what letter it is. So once you get the shim stacked accordingly, then they're just going to bolt, and you're going to bring them up here and just put the link pins right into those. So let's get our shim stack on the spindles, and then we'll get the spindles stabbed onto that beam. So either these spindles have never had their link pins changed because there's a VW logo there and a VW logo there. No VW logos on that side. So I'm going to say whoever did a repair on one side either used original equipment, or this is the original one, that one was changed, not used. Also, the main identifier of what is my passenger, what's my driver, is going to be your speedo cable hole. Look at that. See how the pencil goes into it? And the pencil cannot do that on that one. Okay, so drivers, and this is passenger. Driver's side spindle, shim stack has been installed, O-ring on the inside, their little funky washer. Now there's a little divot on that washer that goes right in that split right there, top and bottom. You have to make sure you pay attention to that. So that's what I was doing in that one you just saw before this, was lining it up, making sure my dimple's in that groove right there, and then giving those pins just a little bit of assistance. And usually that's because these aren't in the exact space, like the upper and lower spacing of them. So you got to give them a little persuasion, as you saw I did with the dead blow. Don't get crazy with it, guys. They just pop right in. Another thing to point out about this spindle, this is a stock spindle. We did not opt for lowered spindles on this. Russell's actually going for more of a retro. And the only reason we did the narrowed beam is because those have a very aggressive offset. And to compensate for that, to get the wheel to tuck inside this wheel well just a little bit, that's why we went with it. This is just a 2-inch narrowed beam, meaning an inch on each side. That brings it in a little bit. All of our drop is going to be taking place on that beam. This will sacrifice ride because of that. It's also going to move the wheel up a lot further depending on how low we go. I always prefer to do drop spindles. Russell had a game plan for this to do more of a retro ride, and that's why we are drum brakes. That's why we have the non-drop spindles. We didn't do adjustable plates in the rear. So we're going to get this side on now. I'm going to show you something on the other side over there. If you saw the first video in this series, I had Ocean tear everything apart and keep everything labeled. So we know that that's the upper link pin. This is my lower link pin. This is the shim stack from the upper. This is the shim stack from the lower. You see how there's only 7 shims on that one? So I'm going to have to supply one more to get the 8 that's asked for in that thing. But this here helps me make sure that I get things back in the exact same spot that they were before. All right, next day we are at it. Wheel seals, inner bearings, outer bearings, drums, already painted pretty. We're gonna be packing these bearings, getting them going. We've already put the starter in. We got an SRN15, which is a brand new starter, not a reman. That's cool. It's been a while since I've seen a new starter. We talked about the bushing. Make sure that's done. Don't slack on that, guys. That's how starters get premature failure. We're gonna get these bearings going and get our day started. Both sets of front bearings are packed. We're gonna go ahead and put them on the vehicle now. Front drums on, steering box on. I gotta do tie rods now so we can get these dudes centered up. I also forgot lock tabs. So I'm gonna see if I can make it to off-road buggy before they close, get a set of lock tabs for this so I can get these torqued on properly. Alright, this is the short tie rod. This is our long tie rod. This angle, and when this gets pushed into it, it crunches all that together, and that's what holds your tie rod itself captive in there. So I gotta narrow these. I have a left hand thread tap and a right hand thread tap, so I can narrow either side. But I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna leave one side alone, and I'm gonna lop one side off. So that's the route I'm gonna go. So I've already taken apart our shorty tie rod, and I'm gonna do the same thing on this. I put an X on both right-hand thread sides. And then since we got a 2-inch narrowed beam, we're gonna be pulling 1 inch off of each of these tie rods to get us where we need to be. So they're gonna be able to have adjustment to set our toe in on the narrow track that we now have on the car. So I'm going to lop these off. I'm most likely going to use my bandsaw, and then we're going to start tapping it deeper. The threads will still be there, so I'm just going to come in and bring them a little deeper. We got a 14 by 1.5 right-hand thread tap that we're putting in there. You saw that we laced it with the rapid tap. That is a must when you're doing this. And take your time, go nice and slow. This is our short one. We still have our long one to do. So I've marked this with the angle. Basically what I did is I took this and I put it in there on both sides and marked where my angle would be with the grease pencil. And now I've taken this end and ground it down. So I think they came out pretty nice. I think that's the way I'm gonna do it. So we're gonna have the compression fittings on all 4 ends now. We put the same angle on it. I'll take it over the bandsaw, get my 4 cuts in it. We'll run the tap through. It should be really quick since it's already tapped. And with the reason why you run the tap through after you make them cuts is just in case the thread's got a little burr on the inside. You want to make sure that tie rod is easily adjustable inside and out as you're turning it. You don't want it to lock up on something and it's a pain in the butt to freaking get this thing to adjust the length. So we put the 4 slits in it on the bandsaw over there. So to make sure that we're not going to have any problem with those threads, I'm just going to run this through, real quick to clean those threads up. And now I've already put the lubrication in there. I put the rapid tap before I started the camera, so sorry about that. But yeah, make sure it's lubricated even on the easy cut. This makes life a lot easier. And when you're doing tapping with the drill or something like that, let the tap pull itself in. Don't force it in. So once the tap gets its own pull in, look at that. I mean, it's just effortless how easy that goes in and out. So there's our short one, is now ready. We're actually going to probably blast this, paint it, and get it really ready, because everything looks so good in the front end. It really sucked to just put these back in there. So we're going to take this one in. Once again, you see that? Like, just let the tap start itself. You son of a biscuit. Beautiful. This should all go together like butter now. When you take the time and do the extra work, the little extra effort, I'm going to say, not even extra work, when you put a little bit extra effort into it, the results are so much better and things assemble easier. Even like the job we're doing now as a whole, because before we got all the parts sent here, trailing arms were painted, backing plates were painted, everything that was going back on it was already detailed painted and ready to go. Obviously new parts came, we had to do a little bit more painting there, but it just looks so much better. Like when you get underneath that freaking Ghia right now, and just how clean it looks, everything on it looks brand new, except for the things like this crusty, rusty piece of crap. That little juxtaposition looks really good. All right, I'm gonna get those cleaned up and painted, and then we'll revisit this. Tie rod out of the blast cabinet. These are your set screws. Your left-hand threads will always have some distinguishing mark. You see that little split right there? And then this one has these slashes on it on the ends there. So this is going to be the left-hand thread, and these will be our right-hand threads. We also blast our little ends. These are going to paint black. These I'm going to do in the Illuma blast. These are going to stay raw because I just wire wheeled these off. These should be just fine and dandy. So we're going to get these things cleaned up, get our brand new ends, so we'll have the tie rods built, and that's going to be the end of our day-to-day. When you're dealing with bare metal, acetone it first, especially if it's been blasted. Get it cleaned off the tie rod, so we're not going for perfection here, but we do want them to look nice. Why put effort into them if it ain't going to be good work? So once you get them clean with the acetone, they're actually ready to spray. So I use this epoxy paint, as you can see there. No primer needed. Rust and salt resistant, all weather. Up to 250 Fahrenheit. So we're gonna get these sprayed out. These here, we're just gonna hit them with the Illuma Blast. I'm gonna put them finished side facing up. I don't want to put any paint in there because we're gonna be putting anti-seize there so they don't get locked up on the tie rod itself. Alright, this thing had a blown out clutch cable in it. We actually had to cut it off the transmission, so I had to pull the pedal assembly anyways because we're gonna be changing these components. So yesterday I had Ocean pull this, blast it apart, blast it and get it painted in epoxy. So we're going to assemble this sweet pickle right here. We've assembled the tie rods now. Here's a little quick diagram for you. Right inner is going to be left-hand thread. Right outer will be right-hand thread. And left inner will be right-hand thread. And left outer will be left-hand thread. So you notice it's like lineal. Right, left, right, left. And there's a reason for that. Because you're supposed to be able to turn these things, as you see in the book here, to correct your steering wheel straightness. If your tie rods are built properly and set up properly, you should be able to turn them in a certain direction to move your steering wheel center. Also, and here's a quick thing. If this is in there and you don't know which way to make it bigger or smaller, Well, I know that's my right-hand side, the outer. So if I start turning this to the left to loosen it, meaning to come off of there, I'm going to be making this bigger because it's going to have the same effect on this side here. When I came to put the tie rods in, I'm looking and I forgot to mount the beam. And then strangely enough, I'm using the factory beam bolts here. And this beam needs to be tapped. It's really annoying. It's the same thread pitch, just poorly done. I got to run that tap into the beam to put that stacked hardware on there to effectively look like that right there. Alright, we got our front suspension almost buttoned up. We got all new brake lines everywhere. We got all new brake componentry under this guy. New gearbox, new shocks, new dang everything. And we still have a ton to go. Let's go look at my board here real quick and let's see where we're at. I've already had a whole list here that I've struck. So now we got more to go. So let's see where we're at. Still got to do it. They're narrowed, now they're on there. Bleed brakes, still got to do it. Install engine, got it, still. Fuel lines front. Zerk fittings for the front, don't have those. 12-volt conversion bulb stud. Look at how much stuff I still got to do. Insane. So all we pretty much handled yesterday was these things that are X'd off of there now. The front bearings got packed, front shocks are put on, steering box has been put in, we narrowed the tie rods, and now we actually built the tie rods and put them on the vehicle. So I still got a ton of stuff to do on that thing, man. And I got to have all that done by Wednesday. We got a lot of stuff happening here, but we're gonna make that happen because I want you guys to see this thing on one crazy weekend. By the way, if you know, you know. That was styled to me by freaking Ronnie Gomez. That dude right here, man. He hooked a brother up. I did some work on his father's car that's gonna be at one crazy weekend for the giveaway, and he knows I'm a real freaking SE head. I'm not a bike collector. These bikes get ridden, man. We got tons still left to do in this car. We got an engine to do. We got electric fuel pump to do. We got a 12-volt conversion to do. We got to get that pedal assembly installed with all new cables. All those carbs, everything. I'm out of boxes now, but I got a lot of parts that still need to go on to this dude and a ton more work. So that's why the video's a little late, because this boy's working. I'm literally putting in 13, 14-hour days right now, just trying to get caught up on my workload. So we will see you next week, hopefully with some more air-cooled VW content. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. It's appreciated by your boy. I'll talk to you later.